Ahoy and welcome to Season 2 of the Blizzard podcast.
Thank you so much for joining us on this new voyage into the world of the RRS Discovery on the airwaves.
We kicked off Season 2 with an episode on Dundee Radio Club recently, which we'll share with you later in the season. We have so many treats lined up for you, uncovering stories and connections to RRS Discovery from all around the world.
If you're new here, welcome. We're Kim and Julie from Dundee Heritage Trust, the charity that care for the RRS Discovery, launched in Dundee 125 years ago and sent on pioneering Antarctic expeditions with Captain Scott and Ernest Shackleton on board. If you haven't listened to Season 1 of The Blizzard yet, you can.
We dived into tales from polar objects, we crept behind the scenes of an award-winning polar play, and we got insights into a daring expedition following in Shackleton's footsteps and more. To kick off Season 2, Kim talks to Will Chandler-Hawkins, who has come to the RRS Discovery in quite an unusual way by rescuing a piano.
Yeah, Will Chandler-Hawkins came across Discovery's story after rescuing and researching a Cramer portable piano from the same era as the Cramer piano that was taken all the way to Antarctica aboard the Discovery during Scott's 1901 expedition. Will restored the piano, and as someone who samples sounds and music for a living, naturally he did the same with this piano, and in doing so captured the sounds that Scott and his crew would have heard and taken comfort in during long winters in the frozen south, and bringing it to a wider audience.
At Discovery Point and RRS Discovery, we've been thinking a lot about the mental strength required to spend time in environments like the Antarctic. We know from explorers now that the isolation, long winters, and a unique way of life in such an extreme environment can really take its toll.
If we consider how compounded that feeling would have been for the men of the Discovery back in 1901, being some of the very first people to undertake such an expedition in that remote environment, it's almost unimaginable without the support of modern medicine and communications. Back in the first episode of Season 1 of The Blizzard, we spoke about the creation of the South Polar Times, and other publications offered creative outlets for writing and drawing by way of helping the men process what was happening all around them.
We know from the crew's diaries that physical exercise also played a really important part, with things like skiing, walking and football on the ice all contributing to positivity and well-being, helping to cope with the social isolation of being at the last place on Earth.
And also music, what we'll look at in this episode. And to help aid the well-being of the explorers over 100 years ago, as Discovery parted New Zealand in late 1901, a vicar gifted the men a harmonia, which is now on show here at Discovery Point. This was on top of the Cramer portable piano with a fabulous pianola, which was also taken south.
The pianola was important because it meant that everyone could play music, even if Lieutenant Charles Royds, the only person who could play the piano, wasn't present. In diaries and biographies, we've read about classical music being played on board, such as Chopin, along with more modern hits, like songs from the music halls.
Scott's diary hinted, however, that there maybe wasn't a career in treading the boards when they all returned home. He wrote,
"The idea of requisitioning our large hut as a place of entertainment had occurred to us early in the winter. And in this connection, it was first used for a concert giving during the first week of May 1902. Royds, who took much pain in getting up this function, arranged a long programme in order to bring forth all of the available talent. Although we were not inclined to be critical of our amusements, one was fain to confess that our company had not been chosen for their musical attainments."
What I love about this particularly is that it highlights the fact that the skill isn't what's important in order to benefit from the arts. Singing along to the radio in the car, joining in when a friend hums a tune, or being able to nail 90% of the lyrics of the song that's stuck in your head makes you feel better and more connected to the people that you're sharing the experience with.
Yeah, it's something that's really intrinsically human, I think.
Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the chat that I had with Will, all about the Cramer piano and the benefits of music, and how he feels a connection to the RRS Discovery when he is with the piano and hearing it.
And make sure you listen right to the end of the episode to hear a piece of music from the Cramer piano, as if you were in the Wardroom of Discovery with Royds, Scott and more. Enjoy!
Today, we're joined by Will Chandler-Hawkins, who has done the most amazing and incredible project around the music that might have been heard on the Royal Research Ship Discovery. So, hi Will, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
I guess we should start by just having you explain the project and tell us what it is exactly that you've been doing.
Of course. So I was lucky enough to come across a patent portable piano, which is a very charming 5-octave small piano that was designed to fold up into itself and be easily carried on board ships for long journeys to keep people entertained. And after finding this piano, I'd sort of doing some research into the background of it, and it seems like the same model, the same kind of era, would have been taken on board the Discovery, which is very exciting to see. So that's why I'm here talking to you today.
Yeah, so I guess that leads us on nicely to my first question, which was, what was the inspiration behind the project that you've done?
Yeah, well, I'm always on the lookout for unusual instruments. I find it's very easy to fall into the same shapes when creating, and having a new toy is quite a fun way of avoiding that. And so when I found this piano, it was in a very bad way. Many of the keys were no longer working. It was completely out of tune. But there was a certain romanticism about it. There was a mystery as to, where it had travelled and who'd played it. And I wanted to preserve its history because I worried that if I didn't take it on, what might happen to it? Lots of stories of lovely instruments sort of being left or thrown away, and I just hated the idea of that. So I had it repaired, and after that I felt like sampling it, which is the act of recording individual notes in detail, felt right. And that way hopefully the instrument can live on and be accessed to lots more musicians.
Yeah, that's really cool. So what was some of that process of restoring it? Was it and did you try and make sure that, so I'm thinking about the way that we're doing the ship at the moment, we're trying to find stuff that's as close as possible, because sometimes the stuff that was used originally isn't accessible for various reasons. How did you go about, or how did you help along that process? Have you gone for modern equivalents? Have you tried to find other old bits and sort of match them together? What was the process for that?
So my ethos was to do the least amount possible to the piano to make it playable. I certainly didn't want to change how it looked aesthetically. I think there's a certain beauty to, its sun-faded body, and it's got scratches, and it's, there's history in the object. So I didn't want to change that. All I wanted to do was to take what was already there and see if we could make it so it was playable, at very least in a way that I could record it and, maybe edit samples afterwards. So I was lucky enough that for the most part, all of the internal mechanism was still functioning and just needed some tweaking in order to be, it needed to be musical in some way. So luckily we didn't have to add too much to it. So that's it.
Yeah, so I knew a little bit about the piano that was on board before this, but I've been doing a little bit more research into it. And I find it fascinating that only Royals could actually play the piano. But for the other times they were using it as a pianola. Essentially it's something that's automatically played. So I guess that sort of leads me on to, is there something that you've come across that's surprised you when you've been putting this, restoring the piano back to its original state? Was there something like a quirk or something inside that you were or you realized once you'd found that it was the same as the Discovery, you were like, oh, I see how that mechanism would have been applied, or maybe it was on that one already?
Yeah, I think, the biggest characteristic of this piano is the kind of ingenious folding away of the keyboard. So, in its hibernation state, where the keys are folded away, it looks like a nice bit of furniture, a side table or something. And it's only when you sort of unclip this beautiful ornate sort of hinge and pull the keys down that you can actually see what it is. And each part of it, sort of taking it apart in order to fix it, and also recording it, getting microphones in certain places, you can see the detail and the genius really in how it was put together and how it was made to, be functional and also be musical. And it's something that I'd never seen, something that the piano tech that I'd taken to help me, had never seen, and we're both very excited about. So it's one of those amazing things of, the genius of years gone by that you don't see anymore.
Yeah, I love a bit of nifty fix-it work that's like quite simple actually when you think about it. Do you think, having done this project and like seen how it folds away, like I'm thinking of them like carrying it up out of the ship and like taking it across to the Terra Theatre to do their music shows in, do you think it's brought you closer to the men on the ship? Did you know much about them before you started the project?
I didn't know much about them at all. I think I knew the general shape of the Discovery voyage, but I think, in a small way, it definitely has brought me closer to those people, and also made me curious to learn more. It's a very particular sounding piano, so not like anything I'd heard. So sort of even just playing it and sort of closing my eyes and imagining what it must have been like for those people to hear it in such a desolate place. It's pretty amazing, really. And in terms of moving it, I can definitely sympathise of, although it looks small and looks quite light, unless you're a burly sailor in the early 1900s, it's quite difficult to move.
Yeah, I can imagine. So I think part of what we've been exploring is how the guys down there looked after their mental health. I think we talk about the physical challenges of being at the end of the world quite a lot in the museum at the moment, and as we're working towards the redevelopment, we're starting to think a little bit more about how you mentally cope with that as well, and trying to like read in between the lines in the diaries in that sort of coded Edwardian way to find how they were actually feeling. As someone that is in the world of music, that is a musician, what would you have to like add to that conversation around how the music, the musical shows, the almost constant playing of the piano, according to Scott, how do you think that helped their mental health down there?
I think music has always given people comfort in difficult times. It's a way of connecting with people through communal listening or performance. I think it allows you to understand and express your emotions, and it also lives clearly in the memory. It can transport you to other places and times as you listen. Speaking of the diaries, on this question I found quite a nice quote, if you'll indulge me. So this is from the Voyage of Discovery. It was, "I don't know what thoughts it brings to others, though I can readily guess, but such things one does not care to write. I can well believe, however, that our music smooths over many a ruffle and brings us to dinner each night in good humour," which I thought was quite lovely.
The smoothing over the ruffle bit I really love, because it just sort of nods to the fact that you're stuck with 40 other men and seeing no one else.
Exactly.
And that actually, 1 minute you can be back at the music hall or at the opera or whatever it is that they're playing at the time, and you're back home and you're reminded like why you're there and why you're doing everything. Yeah, I really love that quote as well. I guess one of the things we ask people quite a lot is about the importance of understanding context. So usually it's about visiting the Discovery, but what impact and how important, I guess, do you think it is for people who are interested in understanding what it was like, even though it's something quite different to any of us were able to experience, even if we were to go to Antarctica today, say? How much do you think like bringing sounds and smells and the senses back, do you think that is to understanding the greater context of the sort of early exploration?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly important. Often we understand history as kind of an abstract story, but being in their space, like you have at the Dundee Heritage Trust, and having access to their personal objects helps you connect to the humanity of the individuals and understand what they must have gone through to actually have been there and experienced all of that.
And I always like to chat to people about their own craft as well, because I think it's important as we talk to different people with different expertises, who have all come one way or another, permanently or impermanently, to the Discovery, about how they landed there. So I guess, how long have you been working with music and sampling in particular for?
I've been working as a producer and a composer for about a decade now, and sampling kind of came quite naturally early on in the process for a way of me to find my own voice. I find that having, a few sounds that are unique to me and my sensibilities made writing music much more fun, and the results felt more authentic. So it's something I picked up early on and have carried on throughout my career.
One thing I particularly love is when I was researching the second expedition, the Oceanographic Expedition, there are certainly like direct examples of them taking musical songs and just putting their own lyrics onto them to like make sense for the expedition. And I'm certain that would have happened in Captain Scott's expedition as well. So why do you think that music is a really good way to tell the stories that you want to tell?
Wow, that's so cool to hear. For me, I think music is an amazing tool for conveying very complex emotions quite easily. If you think of TV dramas where a character walks into an empty room and suddenly you feel on edge and you're not sure why, I guarantee there's a very quiet musical drone that's making you feel that way. For me, I've been fortunate enough to work in lots of different mediums as a songwriter, writing for TV, and now as a samplist. I think each discipline offers a new way of connecting with people and telling stories, and now hopefully with sampling, helping other people share theirs.
Could you talk me through a little bit about the process of sampling? Like what are the stages that you'd go through?
Yeah, so this will vary a lot between projects. It can be as simple as recording, one note on a synthesizer through some effects, to recording thousands of samples with, multiple microphones. So when trying to capture something expressive like a piano, typically I would set up lots of microphones all around the instrument. You hit record, you play all of the notes from the lowest to the highest, from the quietest to the loudest. And then after that, you may also choose to record some of the noises the instrument makes. For example, with the piano, the sound of your key coming off there, your finger coming off the key. And once you've finished your recording, you enter the much less glamorous stage of editing all of your samples and getting rid of any unwanted noises and mistakes. And at this point, you might choose to add effects, which can completely change the way of the sounds, that you've made. Might not sound like a piano at all after that. And then once you're happy with that, the recordings are mapped into a bit of software which sort of let you play the instrument on a digital keyboard as if it were the real thing. And for those who are curious, if you have an iPhone, you have access to a free app called GarageBand, where you can record sounds of your phone microphone and play them back like an instrument. And then there's an app called Flip, which is very cheap, which lets you do the same thing. So it's always really fun to try. My niece, who is 8, loves to record herself shouting into my phone and playing it back either as a giant playing very low or as an elf playing very high. So you're never too young to get started.
Sounds like great fun. So speaking of getting into doing sampling, what advice would you give, if any, to someone that's wanting to pursue a career similar to yours?
Yeah, so my advice is to stay curious and try and prioritize a sense of play in all you do. I think when your hobby becomes a job, it's easy to lose track of why you started it in the first place. But if you focus on what excites you and don't be afraid to let that passion pull you in new directions. At the start of my career, I was perhaps quite closed off and had a sort of one-track mind of I want to do this. But as soon as I sort of let that go a little bit, it was far more rewarding because I was able to explore all these different things that interested me, and I felt like lots of opportunities came up because of it.
Yeah, I think that sounds similar to a lot of other creative careers. Like when you love what you do, it's so easy to just be taken everywhere. But yeah, finding the stuff that really gets you going, I think is really, really helpful. With this process, with the piano, what was your favourite part? Which was the bit where you were like, yes, I'm doing the right thing doing this. This is amazing.
Yeah. So my favourite part of the process is you've gone through all the hardship, you've done all the editing, the hours are gone, and you get to play the instrument for the first time. It might not be the finished version, but it's the first time you put your hands on keys and something comes out of the speakers. And until that moment, you don't really know how it will sound or how it will feel. So it's quite rewarding just for the first time of hearing all of that hard work coming to fruition.
And on the flip side, what's the bit when you're really in the doldrums and you're like, am I doing the right thing with this project?
Yeah, so the most difficult part of the process is trying to keep sight of the big picture. So the pattern portable piano instrument has over 15,000 samples, and all of those have obviously been performed and edited by hand. So when something isn't working or there's an issue, it can be really frustrating. So it's just trying to keep sight of the end goal in those moments to try and push yourself forward.
So a lot of what we do is connected to stories of exploration in a bunch of different ways. We even have like space exploration stuff in our collection. So why do you think it's important to tell stories, whatever way we're telling those stories, with words, with music, with pictures, of exploration? Why do you think that's a theme that sort of runs through a lot of human creation?
I think it's exciting to learn about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. That's why children love books about explorers and astronauts. And often those explorers go through great hardship and have a huge impact on society. And I think for us, it's important to honour that by understanding their lives. And maybe that will inspire people to explore in their own way.
Yeah, I like that. And I think exploration as well can be such a small thing. It can be going on a new walk in your area, or turning left instead of right sometimes, as opposed to you don't have to go to the ends of the earth. But as you said, it's about that curiosity that keeps you going and keeps you thinking, which I quite like. Fab. Thank you so much, Will. We hope to see you up in Dundee at some point. But thanks for chatting.
No, thank you so much for making the time. It's been so great to connect with you on this. It's such a cool project.
And now, as promised, we're closing this episode with a beautiful piece performed on the very piano that Will restored and sampled. We'll be back with another episode of The Blizzard next month. Thank you once again for joining us.